Welcome to the Mental Insights Podcast. This is your host, Brendan.cutuli, and we're here today for episode number 16. And we have a great guest today by the name of Guy Iacono. And Guy does a lot of work within two fields that are very important, being mental health and drug addiction. Guy is a licensed social worker, and he also created a community within drug addiction called the Clean Living Community, and that's available on social media and on the web as well. So we're going to really dive deep into two very important topics today that Guy has a lot of experience within and helping a lot of people today and helping bring a lot of positive light within their lives. So Guy, if you just want to introduce yourself and speak a little bit more about what you enjoy in your life today.
That sounds great. Yeah, first off, I want to thank you, Brendan, for having me on your podcast. I think what you're doing, is fantastic in itself, and I'm excited to be your 16th interview on your podcast. But as you mentioned, my name's Guy Iacono. I'm an LCSW licensed clinical social worker. I work for a mental health nonprofit where we provide mental health education presentations, around the country for middle school, high school, and colleges. And in addition to that, I work in a private practice, and I'm the founder of the Clean Living Community, which, as you mentioned, is an online community where people, share their experiences with their addiction and ultimately found recovery. We have a website and an Instagram following of around 14,000 members, which is awesome. And I'm hoping in the future we'll successfully launch a mobile application that we've been working on and, do some other great things as well.
That's so awesome, Guy. I really look forward to seeing the future of the Clean Living Community. And, as we spoke about that mobile app, I think that is a really good pushing point to reach a bigger audience and really drive change in such an important field. And I think, first off, I really just want to thank you for being here and the work that you do. I think it's incredible that you work within two such important fields, because right now we really need that work today because so many people are suffering. I was speaking with my friend earlier today, and within mental health, the World Health Organization provided that 800,000 people are committing suicide a year, and within drug addiction, I believe there's about 450,000 people a year that are dying due to an opioid-related death. So there's a lot of people that are struggling from these issues, and the work that you're doing is playing a key and vital role into reducing those numbers. And I'm so thankful that you are here today to speak with me and share a little bit more about what you're doing today. So really, to start off, I want to understand more about, when did you first really become aware and interested within the mental health field? Because it's such a large topic, and unfortunately today there's not enough people, whether it's a social worker, a psychotherapist, or a counselor that are in the field today. So what drove that change for you to want to be interested in that field?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I guess I first was introduced to like a psychologist or a licensed clinical social worker when I was younger. So addiction, has impacted my family in a pretty significant way. My mom's currently in recovery. Other family members have struggled with various addictions in my lifetime. And when I was younger, I started seeing a psychologist, and they had profound impacts on me, and they helped me in my own recovery. So I always appreciated what they did. I was grateful for what they did, and I guess as I got older, around high school, my high school and the surrounding high school, we were devastated by a suicide cluster. So unfortunately, I lost a lot of people close to me, very good friends, in this suicide cluster, and it kind of rocked our area. I'm from New Jersey, in a a small beach area. So everyone kind of knew each other, and we're a pretty close, tight knit community. So when this was happening, it was just like extremely difficult for people, as you can imagine. And with my experience, growing up, seeing psychologists and personally benefiting, and then realizing the need as I was in high school when people were unfortunately taking their lives, and our community was just like, unsure of what to do or how to proceed. I would say that really sparked my interest. So in college, I actually started out as a business major. My dad is an entrepreneur and third generation owner of his business. And I thought, maybe I would give it a shot. But after one semester, I just realized that I wasn't too interested in it. I didn't think it was for me at the time. And I decided to switch over. So in undergraduate, I switched to sociology and philosophy with a concentration in the Italian language. And I just loved it. I love learning about social problems and coming up with ways on how to contribute to find solutions or resolve certain issues that we face. And then after that, I returned home, decided to go to a local university in New Jersey, and completed my master's degree in social work in 2 years. From there, I worked in a large hospital system in New Jersey as a MICA counselor, mental illness, chemical addiction. So I treated clients who struggled with co-occurring disorders. And that ultimately led me to having the idea of starting the clean living community and having much larger goals than just, practicing one-on-one with individuals.
Thank you for sharing that, Guy. It's incredible to see that you went through these obstacles, and in turn, it created such a spark of passion for a field that you had deep-rooted connections in. And I think that's what I've been really starting to see within these two fields, that people I've been connecting with truly do have some sort of first or third hand experience with these issues, and they've realized how devastating they can be to a person or a family's life, that they are so passionate in order for someone else to not go through that, or for someone else to see the positive light at the end of the tunnel, that they're so passionate that they want to jump in that field and to provide change and to work within that field. And that's why I think it's so incredible to hear your own story, because the typical way, or the easy way, at least for you, was to go within your family business, but you were able to think and say, all right, no, this is not truly what I'm passionate about, and this is not what I would enjoy doing every day. And it's incredible to see that the transition that you've made throughout the fields. And even you started off with just within the mental health field, but now you've created the clean living community, which we'll speak about later within this conversation. And it's truly remarkable to see that the way that someone, especially yourself, transitions throughout all of these fields to make the impact that you do throughout so many people's lives. And why don't you speak a little bit more just about the work that you do as a social worker, and maybe some of the activities that you do within the programs that you do for some of the schools and some of the children that you work within today, because I think that's so important that you actively work throughout schools to speak about the importance of mental health, because I do think that should be a more prominent goal for a lot of society today, because a lot of schools aren't touching upon why mental health is so important, and why it's such a big problem in society today. So why don't you speak about some of the work that you do within those schools?
Absolutely. My full-time role is with the organization, a nonprofit, as I mentioned before, and the organization is Minding Your Mind. So they started 11 years ago in the Villanova area of Pennsylvania, and they've just been expanding ever since. So I'm actually the director in New Jersey. We have an office in Boston as well, which is great, and I know that you're up there in that area. So we provide mental health education presentations to middle schools, high schools, colleges, and even corporations. Our primary program is a young adult speaker program where young adults share their life experience with overcoming mental health adversities, with a focus on, finding their recovery and just improving their mental well-being. So they go in there, they share their life experience with the goal of removing the stigma around mental health. And it's an amazing organization. After each presentation, students come up, faculty come up, and they hug, the young adults. They thank them profusely. Some people even admit to the young adult that they might be speaking, and in turn, they go to a school counselor or reach out to a psychologist or a social worker to start, setting up appointments and scheduling sessions. So the idea is to encourage people to reach out when they need help and not wait until there's a crisis, and starting mental health conversations early on. So not ignoring warning signs and all of this. And I'm so happy to work for this organization full time, because I know that it would have been such a benefit for, me and my friends through high school and the other communities that have been impacted by suicide and family members, and looking for warning signs and finding, positive and healthy coping skills that are available to, individuals, no matter where they are or what kind of money they have.
That's great. I love the work that you guys provide, because I think what you do is, by providing the young adults to share the story, is so important, because that's a huge way in order to reduce that stigma. Because oftentimes, at least for myself, when I was younger, I was always told from an older individual that, these are issues that people do struggle with, but the barrier that is created through a young adult to an older adult, there, you don't see that you go through the same experiences, or at least you don't think so, even if that adult did go through those experiences when they were younger. And I think that's why being a young adult sharing that story is so important, because you can see that someone was going through the same steps that you are today. And whether they're only a few years older, it provides that much more, opportunity to see that there is an opportunity to become better and to really recover from whatever type of mental health issue that you're going through. So I really love that you guys provide that, because I think storytelling through that way is so valuable today. And when you were speaking originally about when you were getting into the mental health field, a lot of different causes can happen for someone to succumb to one of these mental health issues. So, some things, at least for a lot of people, can be some trauma or childhood experiences. But, through your work and what you've experienced, what are some causes that you've seen of why someone will have a mental illness, and what will cause that dire shift of someone experiencing a negative thought pattern within their own life?
Yeah, that's another great question. So I wish that I could, pinpoint one precipitating factor or one, main contributor to mental illness, or those struggling with, negative thought patterns or negative behaviors. But it's really a culmination or a combination of things. It could be different for everyone. It could be unresolved trauma, excessive stress, lack of sleep, lack of social connection, distorted thinking, really, really anything. There's like a nature versus nurture argument. But when you're able to work one-on-one with someone and understand the larger picture of their story, then you're able to narrow down what precipitating factors could be contributing to their own mental illness. And that's when you come up, as a clinician, with a specific treatment plan for that individual. Because, working with individuals, you can't have like a cookie cutter solution. You can't just take a blueprint from someone else and move it to another client, right? You have to understand that your client is an individual and extremely unique, from every other individual that you've worked with. So there are, obviously similarities as we're all human beings, but understanding what motivates or makes one person tick versus another one, understanding what triggers there are and how to avoid them and how to cope with different stressors are all extremely important.
Totally. And I think that therapy is something that everybody can benefit from, whether they are struggling with a mental illness or they just need a new perspective or a new path within their own life. And for anybody who's listening today, why don't you share about what really goes into the one-on-one process of being with a social worker, a therapist? Why don't you speak more about just how that connection and how that environment can be so important to changing the way that you live your life?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so it all really starts with rapport. As you mentioned earlier, why why the nonprofit that I work for, Minding Your Mind, is so impactful is that these young adults are able to connect with these young students, help them come to terms with things that they might be struggling with, or letting them know that it's okay to not be okay, and that all comes from relativity, right? Because you have a young adult, someone who's not much older than the students in the audience, explaining an experience that they had in their life and giving them hope, right? So you could kind of take that and kind of mirror it in therapy. You want to be able to establish rapport or a nice relationship between the therapist and the client, because without that rapport, without that camaraderie or chemistry, it's going to be hard for the client to trust in the therapist. And unfortunately, I think um, a lot of times individuals will try therapy because they're struggling with something and they go in and after the first session, they say like, oh, therapy is not for me. I wasn't able to connect with the therapist, or, for whatever reason, they didn't really appreciate the session or maybe even the therapist, right? But it's important to not give up on therapy after just seeing one therapist, psychologist, or social worker, whatever it may be. Because I like to say that therapy is like dating. You don't often wind up with the very first person that you dated. It's about, finding people that are similar to you or someone that you could connect with and feeling comfortable in that situation. And if you're not comfortable with one therapist, it's important to move on to another one, someone that you could actually share and open up with. When you get into therapy, there's going to be a lot of background information shared. The therapist is really going to want to learn about your history, your family history, learn as much about you as an individual as possible, and then learn what you're struggling with or what you want to improve on in your life. And then I like to think of it as like a collaborative effort, right? The therapist and the client are going to come up with goals together and work on things together to improve that individual's life. So it's not really a dictatorship or, a therapist telling the client what to do. It's more of like a collaboration where they're agreeing on like a treatment plan. They're agreeing on what they want to improve, because it's important. The most important thing is that the client agrees with and is active in their recovery. Otherwise, the therapist could be kind of spinning wheels and the client's not going to be actively working on anything. And that therapy isn't going to last very long, right?
Definitely. I love multiple perspectives that you just offered. The first being that if you do see a therapist and it doesn't work out on the first try, it's like dating. I love that comparison, because I know a lot of people that have gone into therapy and say, all right, this therapist not for me, but I've tried to correlate it as, maybe that's just not the right one. Maybe that therapy isn't the right one. And I really like that comparison, because it's so important not to give up after that first try or even that second try, because there definitely is a way to incorporate learning within whatever type of trauma or experience you went through, but it's finding the right one that's best for what you're going through and what you want to really get out of that situation. And the second one being that it has to be a two-way street. So not only is the therapist going to be there working with you, but you as the individual seeking that therapy, you need to be giving that 100% effort as well as you go throughout those sessions, because a lot of people do expect to just walk into therapy and say, all right, the therapist is going to give me the answers and I'm going to be done. I'm going to be completely done and I'm going to understand what my problem is and I'm going to know the answer. And within 3 to 5 sessions, my life will be better. And I don't think that's the right way to look at it, because for me, I think it's an ongoing process that, you have to work within your own skills, abilities, thoughts, actions throughout each week. And if you're not actively developing them at all times, it's going to take a while for you to go through this process and understand more of who you are, who you want to be, and where you want to be in the future. So I really loved those two perspectives that you shared, because I think a lot of people have these misconceptions about therapy and what they expect, what they want to get out of it. And it's so important that you have the awareness going into therapy of, what do you want to seek out of this, and not all the times it's going to be a quick fix. You have to work at it and you have to itch at it, which I think is such an important topic.
Oh, absolutely. And, it's important, as you mentioned, to set realistic expectations for therapy in terms of, it's more than just showing up and therapy is difficult in itself. So getting yourself there, to the office or wherever you might be, your counselor, your therapist is a great victory in itself. But once you get there, you have to expect and understand that you have to put in work. It's a difficult process. And as you mentioned, it's not going to change your life in 3 sessions, right? It's a process, like you said. And I think, unfortunately, we live in like a very silver bullet or quick fix society where, people who might be struggling for some time go to a general practitioner or a doctor and say, give me this antidepressant that I saw on the commercial. And that's pretty dangerous because they think that by taking a pill, they're just going to feel better. But you need therapy if you're on a medication for mental health, because it all starts with cognition. You need to change your thought process. You need to change behaviors and actions in your everyday life and incorporate different coping skills, different coping strategies. And it's a holistic approach, right? You can't just expect like a snap of a finger or swallowing an antidepressant or a psychotropic medication to, change your life. You need to actively put in the work. And that goes back to what we were talking about with what to expect in therapy and setting real expectations and goals with your therapist.
Definitely. That's such an important piece, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I was speaking about that topic on an earlier occasion with a friend, and that being that you can't just take antidepressant, this medication that a doctor will prescribe for you and not do anything else. You still have to actively work upon your nutrition, your exercise, the way that you're thinking, the way that you behave. It's all going together. And just like you were saying, just taking and swallowing that pill is not going to fix all your problems. You have to work through it. And I think that's what something really helped me to understand is, the lifestyle that you live is so drastically important to your own mental health. And it's focusing on, what's most important to you in the day. And I think, different types of routines or habits are so important. And like a lot of things that I've tried to focus on is like nutrition, exercise, meditation is a huge thing, and journaling as well. Those have been really key components to keeping myself, mentally healthy, mentally well. And I think if I wasn't doing that, I'd be back in the position that I was, 5-10 years ago, where I was severely depressed and I didn't want to live anymore. So the concept that people think that nutrition and exercise isn't as impactful as it is totally wrong, because a few lifestyle changes can drastically change the way that you feel and live your life today. So I'm so happy that you brought that up, because You can't just take medication to survive and get better. It's a combination of, if you do have that chemical imbalance, okay, you may need that antidepressant through evaluation, but as well, you need to seek therapy. You need to change something within your lifestyle to seek out a better life. And I think this really correlates to what we were speaking about originally is, I think mental health and drug addiction do have a very close comparison, and they do go hand in hand, at least for myself when I was younger. When I was struggling with my own mental health, my resort was to drugs and alcohol, because whether it was peer pressure, but as well as because I was trying to make myself feel better and trying to really suppress a lot of the pain and the trauma that I experienced when I was younger. And I thought that was the answer. And I wasn't putting myself in the right environment in that situation. And through that, I was experiencing, two different problems. I was experiencing mental health issues along with starting to become addicted to, you know, rapidly taking pills whenever I wanted to suppress this pain. And I think this is a great lead into speaking about the clean living community, because what you're able to create through this online platform is so important. And why don't you share a little bit more about the spark to create that, as well as what the clean living community offers today?
Absolutely. And let me just say, I'm so grateful and happy to hear that, you found your recovery and you were able to work on these things and change your life. And now you're here with this great podcast, and the community that you're establishing, I think it's great. It's a testament to, what recovery looks like or what recovery can look like for people who might be struggling. But I started with the clean living community. Originally, it was a concept for a mobile application, and unfortunately, when you are working in this field, you're not really setting the world on fire with salary. Most often, you're not making the same amount of money that maybe like a financial advisor or investment banker or something along those lines would be making. So I was struggling to get the mobile application, off the ground with development and all of that stuff. But I kept seeing these patterns play out when I was, treating different individuals. As you mentioned, there's an extremely high comorbidity rate between mental illness and chemical addiction. And that's why I was, as I mentioned, a MICA counselor, working with co-occurring disorders. Because a lot of the time, like you said, you have an individual who might be struggling with their mental health and they're using, different substances or behaviors to mask their pain or try to get past their suffering by using either drugs, alcohol, or gambling or sex or whatever it may be, right? So I created the Instagram community to try and inspire and motivate and share some hope that there's another side to the struggle, and bringing people together. And I think that social media, is truly a double-edged sword. You could get lost on there, and you could find yourself in some bad ways with isolation and all of these negative things that could come out of it, and cyberbullying and all that. But social media could also be a fantastic tool where you could bring people together with a common cause. And I found that by starting the clean living community, there's a ton of people out there that want help. There's a ton of people out there that want to share their story and bond over something, their recovery. So with that, I created the website where I share individuals' recovery stories in an interview format. So I walk them through questions, similar to your podcast, about their experience with addiction, their experience in their recovery, and ultimately how they found it. And it's all about spreading hope and, again, removing stigma around mental health and addiction, because so many people are struggling. And I think, we've gone pretty far as a society in terms of understanding that mental illness and addiction aren't moral failings, right? These aren't things that you could blame people for. People struggle for different reasons, and they might find themselves down on their luck, and they might do some self-destructive behaviors, but it's not something that we should blame them for. We should help them. And I think we've gone pretty far with, celebrities like Michael Phelps or Logic coming out and speaking out about their mental health, about their mental illness, and about suicide and addiction recovery with Demi Lovato and um, who's the guy? Tony Stark from Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so like, all these people with a pretty significant platform, all these celebrities that people look up to and enjoy and appreciate their art, when they're using their platform and their clout to speak about, you know, stigma and their personal experiences, it goes a really long way. And I think that we're trending in the right direction, but we still have a very significant amount of a significant amount of distance to go. But social media just helps kind of echo, both positive and negative things, unfortunately. But it could be a great platform for establishing a community. And that's what, I've been able to do with the Clean Living community thus far.
That's awesome. I think it's so important, and it definitely is a double-edged sword. But if I think what's most important is if you are trying to, change the thought process and patterns throughout your own life and really seek out that positivity, all you have to do, which I've tried to have people around myself focus on, is only follow the people that are putting out content that's going to either motivate you, inspire you, or provide some sort of learning curve or benefit within your own life. I think that other side of it is when you just see people who are living this grand old life and you start comparing yourself to them, and that's where a lot of these downfalls go. And yes, I think you still can follow those people, but that's where a lot of that negativity, that self-doubt really starts to come into play, which I think if you start to focus on following communities like the Clean Living community and start to understand, what people are doing today, how people are sharing their stories, and where you can provide benefit and positivity within your own life is so important. And I think it's so important that you try to uncover people's stories through that interview process. And I think interviewing is such an impactful tool today, where you can share stories and as well connect and converse with people that may have the same experiences or may have an experience that you've never heard of, but will still provide some sort of clarity or some sort of benefit and learning ability to compare to your own life. So why don't you speak about what actually inspired you to want to do the interview process, and why it's so helpful for your community to share these stories and offer what people are experiencing throughout their own recovery process.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, like I agree, interviews are extremely impactful, and the reason I think so is because it's super easy to look at someone else and label them as other, right? You could look at someone who might be struggling with their mental health or who might be struggling with, addiction, and just say like, oh, look at this person, and start, talking down on them or seeing reasons why you're so different from them and why you could never wind up in that situation. And you're in turn stigmatizing, addiction and mental health and mental illness. And then in turn, if you find yourself in that situation, it's going to be, all coming back to you in terms of how you're thinking about the situation. And it's really not good for the people around you or yourself, right? So with interviews, you're able to understand that these people who might be struggling are just like you, whether you are struggling with addiction or you're not. And you could learn a lot about, the recovery process and addiction if you are addicted to something, or if you've never heard of, or understand what addiction is, right? So for people who are in the recovery process already, or abstaining from their addictive behaviors, whether that's substance or, gambling or sex or whatever it may be, it's it's a great tool for maintenance, right? It's a great tool for abstinence maintenance, to read other people's success to remind yourself how far you've come by reading someone else's story. Or if you're on the other side of the spectrum and you're just contemplating, stopping using drugs or alcohol or whatever it may be, and you read this story about an individual who's similar enough to you, who might have a similar story, and you're able to connect with that story, then that's just a little carrot that you could chase to get to, a point where you're reaching out for help or you're starting the process of recovery, right? Addiction, I think, just knocks down walls that we put up around ourselves and others to distance ourselves from, these social problems, mental illness, mental health, addiction. Sometimes people don't want to see them for what they are, that they're just people like us that are struggling in the moment. And it's easy to just kind of write them off, right? But interviews tell a true story of who the person is and how they got there, and then ultimately how they found recovery, which is inspiring and motivating in itself.
Definitely. I completely agree. And what really I think is important to speak about, you talked about if you are going through that recovery process or if you're not. And for someone that is listening or for someone that has people around them that are struggling, I spoke about with my good friend Matt Ray, who I posted his interview today, about some tendencies that he had because he was struggling with addiction. And he was a good friend of mine who we ended up leading into different paths where I was able to seek a positive outlet and response to, ending my short addiction with, pills and opioids, but he ended up becoming addicted to heroin. And he spoke about some of the tendencies, how, he was able to notice as he was an addict through that process. But for anybody that is listening and from what you've been able to experience throughout people around you, how can someone necessarily identify if they are abusing drugs, or even how can someone identify that they do need to seek help? Because I think it's very hard, especially within mental health too, within both of these fields. There's a factor of knowing that you need the help, but actually going to seek the help. So why don't you speak about kind of that transition process of someone actively knowing and deciding that they want to seek that help, knowing that they are abusing and becoming addicted to drugs?
Absolutely. So I think that there's a big misconception that people have to wait until they're at rock bottom or a place where there's nowhere else to go, but to reach out for help, whether or not you're in that life or death situation, where you've exhausted all their options. That, I guess that's what, you could consider rock bottom, but you don't have to wait for rock bottom. And that's a really important, thing to take note of in this conversation, for anyone who's listening, that if there are warning signs, to act on the warning signs, to reach out for help before it reaches a point where it's literally life or death, right? So if your drug use or if your addictive behavior starts interfering with your everyday life or impeding your ability to, live a normal life or complete tasks that you were once able to complete or potentially even excel at, then those are, significant warning signs. When you find yourself using or going to that addictive behavior just to maintain an everyday basis or just to maintain some baseline, then you're using that addictive behavior as a crutch, right? And then that crutch eventually becomes something that you're living for. So the thing that you need or the thing that you choose to help or assist in your, baseline feeling eventually becomes your baseline feeling. And then without it, you're not able to function. So that's when you see a real, transformation from, heavy recreational use to, serious addiction.
Definitely. I'm glad you brought up that topic because it's true. And I think, that's when a lot of people, once they start, especially when you're a young adult today, when kids start, transitioning into using drugs and alcohol, and when they, see pot and alcohol as these, not not as harmful drugs compared to the opioids and such. So they start off with these, but when some people do gain that dependency, like you said, it's getting, they reach that baseline, and then they always need to seek out something that's going to continue to improve that suppression and that, that downfall, within the way that they feel about themselves, which I'm so glad you touched on, because it really, it can start anywhere. And a lot of people don't become aware that they're abusing these, substances as they move on within their life. And sure enough, within a year or two, you could be abusing very harmful drugs. And at that point, if you're not aware of it, you can lead to a lot of these statistical numbers that we have spoken about recently of people dying from these harmful drugs. I mean, within heroin, they've become laced with fentanyl, with extremely powerful drugs that should not be out there on the streets. And it's truly saddening to see that it's happening to not only young kids today, but everybody, all ages are experiencing these negative patterns throughout drug use. And it's truly, it's very eye-opening. But I think, creating this conversation and speaking about it is one step in the forward direction, which I think is so important. And you spoke about some of the causes of why someone might be abusing substances, one being, their mental health. But is there any other causes, that someone may succumb to using drugs as an outlet for, suppression of emotions and such? Why don't you speak more about why someone would lead themselves to these type of substances?
Definitely, yeah. And I just like to say, addiction doesn't discriminate. And you mentioned, you know, people of all ages are, finding themselves addicted or even overdosing, right? Well, people across, different economic like demographics are also becoming addicted and unfortunately falling victim to this epidemic that we're experiencing. So it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from, what kind of money you have, where you live. You could easily become addicted just like anyone else, right? So
Definitely.
it's important to understand that becoming addicted is almost like a process, right? The same way recovery is a process. So use is going to increase, and then tolerance is going to increase as well. So that means that you're going to have to use more and more frequently, and that's when you start to see yourself become addicted to something, right? So the same way that people become addicted, they have to work backwards to recover. And recovery is as much a process as addiction is. So we have to be patient when we're recovering and when we're working on ourselves through the recovery process. Because as we mentioned before, when you go into a therapy session where you're seeing a therapist, you're not going to be completely fixed in 3 to 5 sessions, right? I mean, it's a process. Everything is a process. And, like a nice saying is, Rome wasn't built in one day. So, it took some sort of behavior and regular, use of whatever your addictive behavior was or substance to get to that point. And it's going to take, equal, if not more, to get back to a baseline of recovery, if that makes sense. And in terms of the question, can you repeat that?
So other causes of drug addiction today. So, one being, you said, mental health, mental illness. Some things that I've understood is a lot of people with trauma or some negative experiences within their life then lead to drug addiction. So what are some causes that you've seen, people, leading to drugs? Obviously there's peer pressure too. But what are some instances that are some main causes for someone succumbing to substances today?
Sure. So I think, underlying mental health issues or mental illness is an extreme contributor to substance abuse or finding people finding themselves struggling with addiction, past trauma, unresolved trauma, excessive stress. People say like taking the edge off, having a super stressful day and coming home and saying you need that glass of wine, you need to smoke that joint, whatever it may be, to relax instead of finding a healthy coping skill like, going for a run, playing or listening to music, some form of meditation or mindfulness, something that isn't, directly changing your brain chemistry or going to that addictive behavior, whether that's like sex or gambling or whatever it may be, right? Finding ways to, you know, deal with the stress in a healthy way, as opposed to just reaching for something that's going to give you an instant gratification of changing your chemistry or relieving the stress immediately. It's going to take a little bit of work. But social isolation, loneliness, boredom, these are all, major contributors to drug use, and then also contributors to relapse. So when you find yourself in the recovery process, when you're in recovery and you're abstaining from, your drug of choice or your addictive behavior, understanding that you need to now fill your time that you were once using or fill the void of boredom and your new lifestyle with, healthy activities, positive relationships, healthy relationships, whatever it may be, to help you, stay on that path of recovery.
Definitely. I think those are great examples because there's so many different ways that someone can lead themselves to a life filled with substances. But I love the point that you made that, it's creating that self-awareness that when you get home, when you either have a stressful day or when that negative experience comes back to your mind or so forth, you're able to say, no, I don't need that substance. What I do need is that run. I need that meditation session. I need that meal. I need to go seek some social interaction. I love that you pointed that out because that's the big drawing line, I think, for a lot of people. There's the easy way that someone can take, especially even for mental health, for instance, like suicide. That's always the easy way out. But the more formidable, the harder road, yes, is to stay alive and face the issues. But the what you're going to seek and gain out of staying alive and focusing on improving your own self and your mental health is insurmountable. It's so life changing because there is a route out there, and I think that's a big determination with, you're sitting there and saying, oh, do I use this substance or do I go for a run? Or do I go hang out with my friends? Do I go see a movie? There's that fine line between the easy and the hard road. And oftentimes, you see it today, people a lot of times choose that easy road, but we need to start showing that hard road, there's a lot of positives that come out of it. And there's a lot of truly life-changing benefits that you receive. And I think that's why, social media is great because a lot of people are sharing their experiences and saying, I was here. I was down in the depths of my own mind and a substance, but look at where I am today. Look at where I was able to come to and what I was able to overcome. And I think that's what's able to provide a lot of people inspiration and a lot of people the choice to say, you know what? I'm not going to use that substance today. I'm not going to kill myself today. I'm going to take the hard road. I want to lead myself into a new direction and a new path. And I think that's why, the recovery and that whole community is so important and valuable for someone to see because it's tangible evidence that someone has gone through it and you can join them as well on that road. So I think that's so important. I'm glad you brought that up because that deciding factor of, yes or no, what's best for me. Often people don't have the ability to make that choice correctly. And it's whether it's working through a therapist or, seeing other people's experiences, it allows for them to see which road is truly best for their own life.
Definitely. And it's important to work on, that impulse control of simply because you have a a desire or an urge or a craving to, do something to engage in that addictive behavior, that you don't have to play it out. So the impulse control of, allowing that craving and that urge to come and go and not act on it. And then also the ability to play the tape out. So consequence evaluation, if I engage in this behavior, if I pick up and use, or if I, go to the casino and gamble, what is going to happen? How am I going to feel afterwards? What are the consequences for my actions in this moment? And those are things that we see, individuals who are struggling with addiction, really, really battle with. They're unable to maintain that impulse control. They're unable to play the tape out and understand that it might make you feel better in that split second, but down the road afterwards, it's going to make you feel worse. And then those feelings of guilt and shame, which exacerbate the addiction cycle, are going to return. It's important to understand all of this stuff. And it might be, difficult to pick up the phone and call someone who, is your sponsor or someone who's helped you along the way, or it might be difficult to get your sneakers on and go for a run in that moment. But as hard as it is to get yourself to that point, it'll make you feel that much better after you do it, right? So it's about understanding that instead of getting that instant gratification, gratification in that moment, that the gratification that will come from, exercising or reaching out to someone who knows you and understands your struggle will be that much more significant and help you so much in your recovery. And the more you do that stuff, the easier it is. So that's the way you form, positive habits and positive coping skills that you have in your tool belt, no matter where you are or where, who you are.
Exactly. I love that perspective. That was such a great topic to speak upon, because it's so important to create those positive habits, because they create in turn a new light for you to see your own self and to appreciate your own life. And this then in turn, speaks about a lot of the relationships, like you said, being able to pick up your phone and call your friend, or, to call your sponsor, is that one step right there is so valuable, because you took a courageous step moving forward, and you didn't not pick up that phone, and you didn't say, all right, no, they don't want to speak with me, or I don't need to speak with them because I don't need that help. So I think the importance of relationships is of very valuable, because what you really surround yourself with dictates a lot of how you live your own life. For me, when I was younger, I surrounded myself with a lot of people that did not really seek the best interest for my own good, and they really led me into a path that wasn't best. So, why don't you speak about the importance of relationships within not only drug addiction and those people who are going through recovery, but as well mental health, because, having these positive habits and routines of, having a friend that you can go for a run with, or having a friend that you could cook a meal with, can provide so much value within your own life. So, why don't you speak about how relationships can dictate whether you're able to fully go through recovery, or, how they can bring you into a even more negative place than you were before.
Sure. So social connection is extremely important for humans. Human beings are social beings. We're similar to pack animals. We need socialization, and when we're struggling is when we're most vulnerable. So, the same way, you mentioned, potentially going with the wrong crowd and, doing things that weren't in your best interest. You know, when you're struggling with addiction, it's important to understand who are the people and where are the places and what are the things that you guys are doing. So in recovery, people, places, and things are three concepts that we, discuss all the time, right? So who are the people that you're with? What are they doing? And where are you guys going? Like, what is the goal of the community that you're putting yourself into? Are your friends, like just looking to get high or engaging in these activities that you're now addicted to? Because that is the sole purpose of what your relationship is, right? I mean, it's so often am I with someone in a session where they say like, oh, my friends, they're not going to want to hang out with me because I'm not going to be, using drugs, or I'm not going to want to gamble or engage in any of these like other addictive behaviors. And at the end of the day, like, are they really your friends, or are they just like the people that you're running with? And running, I mean, like, engaging in those unhealthy behaviors, the ones that you're trying to avoid, right? So simply because you're with them when you're using doesn't mean that they're your friends, because at the end of the day, your friends should have your best interests at heart, right? They should want what's best for you. And unfortunately, when you're struggling with addiction, all of those best interests kind of go out the window, and you're only focusing on how to get back that high, whether that's through substance or, another behavior. So social connection on the other side is extremely important as well, where you're surrounding yourself with support, whether that's family, whether that's friends, whether that's just a clinician at first, right? A psychologist or a therapist, someone who does have your best interest, someone who's going to help you get through those times where you're struggling, and remind you, you don't have to pick up, or you don't have to engage in this behavior to feel better. And even though in that split second, in that one moment, it might feel better, it's going to make you feel way worse afterwards, right? So having a community of people who share your interests, whether that's running, photography, cooking, eating, going to the movies, it literally could be anything, is extremely important. Finding people who are like you and don't only want to engage in those unhealthy behaviors goes a long way, right? So when you find recovery, it really is a transformative process. You need to transform your life. You need to find new friends, find new social circles, find new places to go, avoid the places and the things that you were once doing, because those things could all in turn become triggers, and we want to avoid as many triggers as possible.
Absolutely, Guy. I love that answer. And there's so many different ways of how relationships can impact our own life. And it's really about evaluating what people around us are doing and how they're influencing our own thoughts and actions, and becoming aware of, are they a positive relationship or are they a negative relationship within our own life? And I think evaluating what people really bring to the table, and especially what you are offering to your friends as well, is so important, because there has to be a two-way street, and in order for you both to gain value from your relationship and make sure that you are both helping each other to, overcome any obstacles you have, but as well just enjoy your activities, your routines, your life together, and make sure that there's value in both of your own lives together. So I just want to thank you first off for being here today. I have one more question, but I really want to provide some gratitude towards you being here today, towards the work that you do. I think what you do is truly commendable, and it offers such a great perspective in terms of, you are a living example of, you experienced something at a young age, and you in turn took your obstacles and flipped the perspective, and now you're helping people go through similar experiences and similar issues that you saw cause harm to people and yourself while you were younger. So I really want to thank you for the work that you do, and as well for being on this podcast today, because it was such a pleasure interviewing you and sharing more about the work that you do. And I really look forward to continuing this connection further, because I think we have a lot in line in terms of the work that we do, in terms of our goals in the future. And there's a lot more growth and value that we could provide within these two fields, because like we were saying earlier, there's still so many people struggling from these issues, and we definitely do have a lot of work to do, but we are getting the ground running today, and what we're able to already provide for people going through these experiences is extremely valuable and important for what we're doing. So I really just want to thank you for being on this podcast, Guy. It's really been a pleasure thus far.
Oh, thank you. Again, like I want to thank you because what you're doing is amazing as well, and it's awesome to hear, your recovery story and your friend's recovery story because it just reiterates the notion that recovery is possible, whether that's addiction recovery or mental health and well-being recovery. And the fact that you have, people like me on your podcast and you're continuing to spread the good word is amazing in itself. And I want to thank you in turn for having me on and for doing what you do as well.
Wonderful. You are so welcome, Guy. It's been a pleasure. And for my last question, I really like to ask my guests a question that may put them on their toes a bit, but I think it's truly important to understand and reflect upon what you are going through outside of your work today. So my question is revolved around you writing a book throughout your life thus far to your day. And the question that I want to ask is, there's going to be one chapter that is going to be revolved around the past year or two of your life. And I want you to give some insight in terms of what necessarily was a topic or a theme or a lesson that you've been able to uncover that was of great value and of great substance that provided a new perspective or a new mindset change throughout your own life, whether it's positive or negative. Give us a little insight about what you've been able to learn and uncover from your own experiences, whether it's within your field of work or within your own personal and self-discovery.
Yeah, that's another great question. That one definitely puts me on my toes. I would say, if there was like one chapter, maybe I would title it perseverance, I guess, just because as you continue to go, on your path and work towards things, just remembering not to give up, whether that's personally or professionally, doing whatever you're doing, just as long as it's something that's bringing you joy and is benefiting you and others, then you persevere and you continue on that path, because no matter where you are, as long as you continue to go and explore and continue to learn and meet new people, new and better opportunities will come. So I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity to work for, the organization that I'm working for full time, Minding Your Mind. And it's something that I never would have considered myself doing. Working in a private practice and being able to help and work with individual clients on a regular basis is, a goal that I set for myself years ago, and I wasn't ever sure it would really come to fruition. And just being where I'm at and who I am, on this day to this day is, I think, just all about perseverance and continuing on that path. And no matter how many obstacles come in your way, continuing to either jump over them, go through them, or move around them some way and persevere on your goal, toward your goal and on your mission. Because as you persevere and as you progress, new people will come into your life who could help you, and you in turn could help them. And just not losing sight of who you are and what your goals are and what you want out of life and what you want out of, different objectives that you're potentially working on. Just keep going. And if you're struggling, just make sure, you know that it's okay to reach out, and there are people who are willing to help, and there are people doing great work in this world and in this life.
That's awesome, Guy. I love that response. And I think that definitely speaks to who you are and what you've been able to do thus far. And I think what you are going to continue to do within the future. So I'm so happy to hear that. And it really was such an honor to have you on my podcast today. You were the 16th episode of the Mental Insights podcast. And it was such a wonderful pleasure to speak and share your story. We're going to have all the links to your work, to your social media, to your website, and allow the audience to see more about your work and to get in touch with you to, share their own stories for anybody who's listening who has experienced these issues, or for someone that may be facing one of these issues throughout their day to day, that they can reach out to you and gain some more insight and value to how they can move forward within their own challenges within their life. So it's a pleasure, Guy, and I really look forward to sharing all of your work with everybody. It was such a great interview. I love that we were able to do this. So thank you again.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity, and it was awesome hearing your story and speaking with you. I appreciate, the opportunity you've given me to share about myself and my work, and I hope in turn I could do the same.